our very best to promote. We want to create a space that is safer, friendlier, and more inviting. We have planted 22,000 plants and trees in the city. There has been 7,300 hours of cleaning across the city, and 5,000 square metres of new play experiences have been added, including the world's best playground at Wellington Square. And under the broad heading of Sustainable City, 1.56 million rubbish bins have been emptied this year. Over 2,200 facility, hygiene or safety inspections have been carried out, and over 4,300 votes were cast in the 2021 election. A prosperous, livable and sustainable city. And for our council members here before us, 120 hours of strategic work, 232 reports considered, 42 meetings and 25 engagement sessions. And I thank my fellow councillors for their tireless work to make the city of Perth the great place that it is and continue it on the journey of becoming an even better city. And can I just acknowledge our team, the administration led by CEO Michelle Reynolds, for their tireless work also. We won 8 awards for events, environmental practices, architecture, parks and landscaping, and supported community through 3 COVID lockdowns, and with a quite brilliant 2021 AFL Grand Final Week activations. On page 2, and I won't read it all out, but on page 2, there are more details about the great work that we have been doing. Michelle, with you here and many of your senior executive team, on behalf of the elected members here and our community, can I thank you for your diligent, tireless and never-ending pursuit of excellence in our city to make us the best place that we can be. Thank you for all the great work that you have done. We appreciate it, and I know our community appreciate it also. And that document will be circulated and will be also available on our website. Working for You in 2021 is what it is titled. Can I just take one last opportunity to give you some numbers? And these are just through to us only in the last couple of hours or so, but from our economic development team. And I guess one of the things we wonder as we look to make our city shine during December, and there is no doubt this is the best time of the year in the city. The weather is great, families are out enjoying the city, the weather is terrific, although it's going to be very hot for Christmas week, and also there are great attractions in our city. But you do wonder, here as Lord Mayor, and I'm sure as councillors, is this just a December phenomenon? Do we get better each year? Or do the numbers just stay high because it is that season? So some numbers through today. For Christmas Lights Trail, Friday and Saturday crowds continue to exceed 2020 levels. They are up this year as opposed to last year, 35% on Fridays and 40% on Saturdays. They are excellent, excellent numbers. The Hawkers Market in Forest Place, pedestrian activity in and around Forest Place is up 17.2% in the hours of operation on the Friday nights of the Hawkers Markets in December 2021, this year versus 2020. And for overall people numbers, weekday December pedestrian activity is up 8.6% in December, but noting that we haven't had the peak yet of Wednesday, Thursday and Christmas Eve, when I will be doing my shopping. And weekends in December, so we've had the last of the weekends, this year versus last year, up 12.7%. So these are really great numbers. They show that the city is alive, that we have an offering that people want to make the most of. We've worked hard to promote our parking. There are 3 hours free on weekends in 3 of our best car parks, $5 at night, $10 all day in select car parks. We are doing our very, very best, in fact, better than our best, to make sure that our city is a place where people can come, feel comfortable, enjoy Christmas and celebrate the great things that our city has to offer. And just finally, I'll mention that on Saturday night and Sunday night, the Christmas Nativity, a remodelled version, and at quite a different cost structure, was held in the city. Both nights I was there, fabulous crowds both night, well attended. The audiences were very engaged. They were great shows, high quality, and I've had lots and lots of feedback, people saying how much they enjoyed them. So well done to our team for reimagining what was possible in that space, but also complementing and completing our commitment to make sure that the nativity production is part of our Christmas offering in the city of Perth. So to all of the people that have made all of those great things happen, thank you to our staff, thank you to our councillors, and thank you to our visitors for celebrating Christmas and seeing the city shine in 2021. So with all of that, I move to... Yes, that's right. Here it is. 5.1. Public questions. No public questions have been received in advance for this meeting. Are there any questions from the floor? So item 5.2 is deputations. CEO, are there any deputations?
Yes, Lord Mayor, we have received 2 deputations in relation to item 14.3.
Okay. Thank you, CEO. Please be reminded there is a 10-minute limit for deputations. I'm now going to invite Leslie Warren, representing the East Perth Community Group, to please step forward to make your deputation. Leslie, welcome back. Congratulations on a terrific East Perth Community Group event a couple of weeks ago. Brass on the Grass, well attended by us. We enjoyed it, didn't we, Councillor Gobbett? Councillor Gobbett was in shorts. That was a highlight for me. Leslie, if you could, your name and address.
My name is Leslie Warren. I live in Bronte Street in East Perth. And apologies that I too am in shorts, but my car's broken down in Mandurah and I just hopped off the train.
Wow.
So limited resources for this meeting. So Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leslie Warren of the East Perth Community Group, and I'm speaking today for myself and on behalf of the East Perth Community Group Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to make representation to the council with respect to the council exploring options for a community group insurance support program to cover the costs of insurance for community groups in the city of Perth. I'm speaking as one of the community groups potentially affected by this proposal. Insurance is a vital part of our viability and business operations, and we welcome the city exploring options that will assist us in neighbourhood placemaking and supporting our community and livability in the city. Our Vice Chair and Chair attended the agenda briefing session last week and are unable to make this session. I'm continuing their submission. As advised at the agenda briefing session, the East Perth Community Group currently has close to 900 members. We have an active committee of 8 and several working groups with approximately 40 regular and active volunteers. Our shindigs and community meetings also regularly attract 100 or more members, and you've referenced Brass on the Grass, which is an annual event which this year we put on. Over the last several years, the East Perth Community Group has applied for sponsorship from the City of Perth for a variety of events and activations. The cost of ongoing administrative expenses, such as insurance, is specifically precluded currently under the City's policy on sponsorship. Insurance has repeatedly been mentioned as an issue for us, either in relation to insurance costs or the relevance of the coverage to the activities of the group. Brass on the Grass was a case in point. Our insurance only covers events up to 500 people. We needed to engage an events company in order to ensure we had sufficient coverage. In some cases, we doubt if we could obtain suitable insurance. For instance, if we pursued grants to install parklets, there are concerns regarding insurance cover for the installed infrastructure. The more we look into this issue when considering activities in the community, the greater the concern we have. Affordability of insurance is a critical issue to us, as we need it to provide financial protection and peace of mind for members, volunteers and participants. The East Perth Community Group shares the same broad concerns with insurance as other neighbourhood groups such as West Perth Local, Northbridge Common and City of Perth Western residents, and we've spoken with representatives of these groups and are of a similar mind with regard to the proposed limits the groups potentially impacted and the policy changes required to make this work. To begin with, a $2,000 limit would not be enough for us. Our current insurance is $2,776.22 and is cheaper than the $3,540 we were initially quoted by another company. However, it does not include workers' compensation, which we've recently identified as a potential shortcoming. We're also mindful insurance premiums are likely to increase, and therefore the costs are only likely to increase. A $2,000 grant, while welcome, would not cover our current insurance. Your initial estimates of 20,000 shared between 10 groups and breakdown of costs comes in at 1,830 per group, excluding GST, and 2,013 including GST. As a non-GST registered organisation, we are required to also find the GST component. This would leave a gap between the amount we currently pay and the proposed grant amount, which is likely to be even greater when workers' compensation and increase in premium amounts over time are included. We have not been able to find adequate insurance cover for costs as low as those that were quoted in the exploratory paper. I understand there was some discussion at the agenda briefing session regarding the groups covered. Whilst comfortable at the notion new entities could be included once they are established, we would probably be happy to see this grant restricted to entities that have been active in the city, are involved in neighbourhood placemaking, such as those that attend the neighbourhood meetings, neighbourhood place plans, and those that deliver to communities, potentially using City of Perth grant funding. We do support the need for there to be some rigour around the process and rules, for example, the need for the groups to be incorporated. Finally, we have a question around timing. Current grant guidelines do not allow for reimbursement for previous expenses. We would welcome some clarity around this in the guidelines, especially as insurance renewal periods may not align with grant timelines. To protect the public purse, we would also think that a requirement for 2 quotes would possibly be prudent. In closing, we want to be clear we're very appreciative of the consideration the Council is giving to the funding of assurances for community groups, and request that further consideration be given to the current and projected costs we incur to obtain adequate coverage. Thank you, and as this is the last council meeting and the last opportunity, Merry Christmas, and thank you for your support over the year. It's been appreciated.
Thank you, Leslie, and to you too, and to all of the East Perth Community Group team and members. I'll just ask you to stay there if you don't mind. If any councillors have questions in relation to this deputation, now is the time. A reminder though, if any councillors have questions of the admin in relation to the item, I just ask you to hold those until this item is tabled for questions. So does anybody have any questions for Leslie, Deputy Lord Mayor?
Thank you very much, Leslie, for your deputation. I'm aware that you're not the Treasurer of East Perth.
No, I am the Treasurer.
Oh, you are? Okay. How much have you spent on insurance in the last 12 months?
That was, well, the amount for the last insurance premium that we paid, that was...
Including all your events insurance?
Well, the event insurance for the Brass on the Grass, because it was over 500, we had an events management company, so their insurance covered that. So our insurance for the 12 months was $2,776 and 22 cents.
And did that cover all your events?
It covered events up to 500 people, okay. But we didn't have any other events over that amount.
So the kind of insurance that you took out was insurance beyond just business as usual insurance for a community group. It was not just your public liability and your directors and officers insurance. It was, hang on a minute, sorry, I've gone and moved the file and now I can't find it. It will be here. That's okay. I think you've given us a ballpark. Perhaps I can ask you, if you had more opportunities to apply for insurance coverage, would you have bigger events beyond 500 people? Would you apply for bigger events? Look, the way the City of Perth now has the grants program structured makes it a bit difficult to answer, because the grants that you give to some extent are predicated on the amount of patronage you're expecting. So because events up to 500 would normally only attract a small grant amount, that would potentially limit what we would aim for. It's been a learning curve this year with insurance, and last year as well with the previous chairperson, with Michelle McGlosky. We really started looking closely at insurance, what we were actually covered for, and whether we were getting value for money. And that's why we sought a different insurer this year, because the 3,500 that we were quoted didn't actually include the volunteer accident insurance, whereas our current policy does. So we've got public liability, office bearers, association liability, and voluntary workers. This is the three components of what we actually have at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Leslie, does the East Perth Community Group charge a membership?
Currently, we don't charge a membership. It's one of the very many issues that I have been exploring in the last year in terms of how we're actually going to fund ourselves ongoing. We've certainly flagged it at our last AGM. It's on the public record. I tabled a record of the annual expenses for the last 9 years, 2013. And that information is in the public domain and included in it, the fact that what insurances were. The question of membership fees did generate a little bit of debate. Because of the size of our membership, which is 900 people, at the moment the Treasurer does the job with a spreadsheet and my brain, and until we actually have a process in place to accept fees and the like, you can't just launch out and do it, because how are you going to manage the admin behind it? And yeah, so there's some limitations there. We need to look a lot more closely at what our likely take would be, and then what we would do with it in terms of provide, some admin support around that.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a vexing issue.
No, I understand. So, because I think what the city's proposing here, and then we'll see this a little bit later on, and is a sort of a first-year trial amount of $2,000. But we would agree that would go some way, or a lot of the way, towards covering your insurance costs.
It would go $2,000 towards of the way, which this year was 2,700.
700. So you'd be 700.
Next
short.
year would probably be more, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Sure.
Leslie, just to follow up to the Lord Mayor's inquiry, what are your other revenue sources?
At the moment, we get some small amounts of grants and sponsorships, but I would say that some years ago, the East Perth Community Group had a healthy surplus, and over the last 8 years or so, it's been just, gradually whittled away. So we've got Containers for Change. We get some grants and donations. Very occasionally, there's a little bit of money that's left over after a particular activity, or we've raised money at raffles and the like. So,
okay, so in terms of your events that you put on for the community, are they largely sponsored by the City of Perth?
Some of them are largely sponsored by the City of Perth. And we've also got some other sponsorships from some of the other businesses. Yeah.
In East Perth?
In East Perth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from any of our councillors? Okay, we'll get the opportunity to discuss this a little bit later on. Leslie, thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you too, and best wishes to all of the East Perth Community Group members. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go now to Steve Willard, another familiar face. Steve is representing West Perth Local. Steve, if you'd like to come forward, again, 10-minute reminder, if you could state your name, your address, and away you go.
Thank you very much. My name's Stephen Willard of 1303 Hay Street, West Perth. I'm here representing West Perth Local, where I hold the title of President. We changed from Chairperson to President, which sounds so much more interesting. Good evening, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillors, CEO and the Senior Executive. Today I'll speak to the current recommendation for item 14.3 Community Group Insurance Program. As the leader of a dynamic community association, I don't normally intend to spend much time talking about insurance, as we have many great and exciting initiatives to work on delivering with the city. However, as a volunteer not-for-profit organisation, we can only be successful in delivering events and activations if we have adequate insurance in place to protect our volunteers, our contractors, our visitors, and of course the association. With that in mind, it's important for us to get this agenda item right for both the active incorporated neighbourhood groups and the city who helps bring those things to life that we do. Last week, our outgoing Vice President and subject matter expert, Rachel Thomas, outlined the reasons why the proposed $2,000 per neighbourhood group was grossly inadequate. We've spent this week reviewing our current insurance policy, its limitations and its shortfalls. Due to budget and scope constraints, and really just West Perth Local getting up off the ground, we had an insurance policy in place for the minimum required to carry out small events up to 500 people, very similar to what Leslie outlined. We don't have the funds available to upgrade our policy to include things that were listed last week, like voluntary workers insurance, association liability, or even workers' compensation that was mentioned during the deputations. We now understand much better that there are risks that we're carrying that's not healthy for us to continue long term. We've been advised that adding in these new elements will almost double our current premium up to about $3,850 in 2022. We've also been advised to expect price increases in 2023, 5–10%. We therefore request the proposed budget be increased to allow funding of up to $4,000 per neighbourhood group per financial year, with an additional allowance for inflation and premium increases over subsequent years. Now, we understand this is not a low-cost initiative, and therefore, as a proposal to limit the impact to the city's budget, we suggest the number of eligible neighbourhood groups be much less than the 10 or 12 mainly inactive groups that were listed during the agenda briefing. And utilising the city's neighbourhood place plans 21-22 as a guide, we recommended the following active, registered, incorporated association neighbourhood groups be incorporated in the initial funding scope. So from the suburb of West Perth, it'd be West Perth Local, Northbridge would be Northbridge Common, from Crawley Nedlands would be the City of Perth Western Residents Association, Central Perth would be Activate Perth and Historic Heart, and of course East Perth would be the East Perth Community Group. So this totals 6 active incorporated neighbourhood groups at a cost of up to $4,000 per group would make the total 2022 budget $24,000. Now, additional budget may be required in subsequent years should premiums rise significantly, or if the city recognises additional active neighbourhood groups that require dedicated insurance policies to safely carry out the City of Perth funded community activations. West Perth locals see the proposed changes I've outlined today as a great start in working even more closely in 2022 for the safe benefit of our volunteers, ratepayers, workers and visitors. I'd like to thank the Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and the City Administration for their consideration and support of the neighbourhood groups throughout the year across the city. Thank you and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Steve. Merry Christmas to you too and everybody in West Perth. You all do a terrific job and important members of the City of Perth community, obviously. Does anybody have any questions for Steve? Thanks, DLM.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Steve, thank you very much for that deputation. Can you tell me what your revenue sources are for West Perth Local?
Yeah, we have for real revenue sources, which is definitely funding from the city. We have grants that come in from the likes of the RAC, and we have approached the likes of the state government and the federal government for funding as well. But we also have membership, which is quite low, but it does generate some funds to allow us to do ongoing costs that aren't covered by grants. Even if we talk about the commercial grants that do come in, they do have limitations as to what you can spend those on. As you know, we do have a shop front, so we receive in-kind, I suppose, rent, so we don't pay for that, but we do have to pay for electricity and telephone charges and the like. So that's where our membership and other grants are going to. So that's basically where our sources are.
And do you think that getting the right amount of insurance will help you evolve and elevate your offering for West Perth?
Definitely, we want to step it up. Definitely, right now we're looking at an event for the Perth Heritage Week, and as Leslie mentioned, with the city's activation grants, it's in different stages. And the first stage, I think, is $5,000 for events, roughly about 500 people. Then it jumps up to $10,000 for events up to 1,000. So for us to do an event beyond 500 people, we need a better insurance policy. So this would help us then to step up and do some events that have much more coverage, much more reach across the residents, visitors, and workers across West Perth.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thanks, DLM. Are there any other? Can I ask what your membership fee is, Steve?
$100 for businesses and $10 for individual members.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone? No, Steve, Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate your deputation, and Leslie's also. We're going to move then to item number 6. There's no other deputations, I see. Item number 6 on the agenda is disclosure of interest. CEO, have any disclosures of interest been received?
Yes, Lord Mayor, the following interests have been received. An impartiality interest from Councillor Leeser in relation to item 12.3, as Charles Kingford Smith was her great-grandfather's cousin. A proximity interest from Councillor Gordon in relation to item 13.2, as her apartment is adjacent to His Majesty's car park. A impartiality interest from Councillor Gobbett in relation to item 14.3, Community Group Insurance Support Program, and an impartiality interest from Acting General Manager Corporate Services, Melissa Murphy, in relation to item 16.2, as she has previously worked with Paul Rosaire when he was the Director General, Department of Regional Development, and more recently as an associateship non-contractual with Paul Rosaire's consultancy.
Thank you, CEO. Do any elected members or staff have any disclosures of interest from the floor?
Can I just declare, in the interests of transparency, perhaps an impartiality, that I have met with Paul Rosaire in the last, I want to say 6 months. He reached out in my capacity as Chair of Tourism Western Australia, but there was conversation that he was working for the city, but no details explored.
Thank you, DLM. Noted. Are there any others from any councillors or staff members? Okay, let's move on to item 7. Would anyone like to move a motion to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 30 November 2021? Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Leeser. Do any members oppose this motion? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Fleeton.
I'm not raising any issues. I've raised it with the city before. We don't get to debate the item, it's just to note that their accuracy is not.
Okay. So, given that you've said that, is it worth knowing what you think might be inaccurate or not?
There's no discussion on the minutes.
Okay, rightio, thank you. So, all those in favour? That is Councillors Leeser, Coe, Gobbett, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, Bevan and Gordon. All those against? Councillor Fleeton will declare that passed 6-1. 7-1. 7-1. Thank you. Questions by members which due notice has been given. There's none here. There's no correspondence been received. And item 10, petitions. No petitions have been received. So, we'll move then to our reports. Before we move on to the reports, I'm moving a motion that the following items be carried on block. 13.3 Waste to Energy, 14.1 Monthly Financial Report October 2021, 14.2 Schedule of Accounts Paid October 2021, 15.1 Draft Strategic Community Plan 2022 to 2032 Public Consultation, 15.3 2022 Council Meeting Schedule, 16.1 Fraud and Corruption Plan, 16.3 Internal Audit Reports 2020-2021. Could I now get a seconder for this motion? Please, thanks, Councillor Fleeton. Do any members oppose this motion? This motion being unopposed, I will now declare it carried unanimously. The recommendations of those items have now been passed on block in accordance with clause 9.2 of the City of Perth's Standing Orders Local Law 2009, and the officer's recommendations have been adopted by Council. We'll move now to item 11, Planning and Economic Development's Alliance Reports. 11.1 is fenced off lead, say that again, fenced off lead dog park investigation. Would anybody like to move a motion to deal with this item? Thank you, Councillor Gobbett. A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. Councillor Gobbett.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just briefly speaking to the recommendation, this was an issue that was raised with me some time ago, and I'm glad that it's come before Council for a decision finally, and particularly of interest that the two parks that are nominated, the new one towards the northeast of the city and an expansion of the existing one. I frequently walk past the existing one at the end of Langley Park at Ozone Reserve, and it's quite a popular local community amenity. So I look forward to seeing how it's going to be used in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Gobbett. Councillor Fleeton was the seconder.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Can I ask a question first? And I'm sorry for some of the questions I asked this evening. I was sick last week, so I didn't get a chance. Firstly, in the report, did the city consider, with the expansion of ozone, to introduce some fencing to separate small and big dogs, as in the consultation?
CEO.
Could I please ask the General Manager Planning and Economic Development to respond?
Thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor, yes, we did explore that possibility, particularly given it was something that the community had indicated they would like through the consultation process. I'm advised that the optimum size for a dog park, if you're going to separate the areas into areas for small dogs and large dogs, is around 2,000 square metres. And that's to prevent overcrowding and degradation of the space in too quick a time. And so at Ozone it was decided not to segregate the space because that would mean a much larger expansion than 400 square metres. And at this stage it was considered not appropriate to do that given the use of that reserve for other much larger public events.
Thanks, GM.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. That's my only question. I'll just make some comments. Happy to support. Page 28 of 317 states in its research, Wellington Square is a site of significance and represents an important meeting place for traditional owners. During the consultation of the recent upgrade of Wellington Square, the Whadjuk Working Party requested that the park be left unfenced and welcoming for all users in respect of the site's cultural heritage. Council will be sick and tired of me hearing this, but I want to see more emphasis on the respect part too when it comes to this park. We all know that's not the case right now. There are too many people trashing this park. We're not able to see people using the $18 million playground. I think that's actually a much better site to invest in a off-lead dog park, to put some fence around it, but we'll rely on their feedback. And I particularly want to concentrate on page 34, where we're going to include a power outlet for food vans. Why would we use ratepayer funds to install infrastructure to give an unfair advantage to businesses not from the city who are not paying the same high level of costs as our own ratepayers do, less than 2 minutes of walking distance from these facilities? We've got a new coffee place opening at the bottom of View Tower. On the Point is a nice walk and close by. Plus there's a Japanese takeaway restaurant near the bowling club and a cafe around the corner. I don't know why the city would suggest that we turn a off-lead dog park into a place where businesses who aren't even paying rates to us can come and take advantage of it. But Liam, great motion. I know this is part of what you've been pushing and happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. Does anybody wish to speak for the motion? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Gobbett.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and perhaps just to address Councillor Fleeton's comments just now. The inclusion of the power outlets was really to just facilitate any sort of community events that might run or might be able to run on the park. Jack Marks Park, for example, in the city of Vincent, frequently has small one-off little events, and it's just a great community building day. People with their dogs are always out there, so that was really the intent behind that. It wasn't to undermine any local businesses. So,
thanks, Councillor Gobbett. Oh, that was bad luck. Thank you. Without anything further, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Move to item 12, Community Development Alliance reports 12.1, Major Events and Festival Sponsorship. Would anyone like to move a motion to deal with this item? I will. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gobbett. Right, so I will open the batting then. Well, the Council's recommendations are there to support an in-principle budget allocation of $3 million. We've talked about becoming the major events and festivals capital of Perth. I think we're some way down the path to being that, but clearly we need to have some bang for our buck available to us to be able to do this, and opportunities will present from time to time, some that we're not necessarily expecting. And we know that when these amounts were first mooted back in the day, the cost of putting on events, the competition, what you're trying to do, the technology, all of those things means a bigger budget is required. And I think the bigger budget is significant. I note also that the recommendation from admin is that the sponsorship provided by the City of Perth not exceed 60% of the total event budget. I appreciate that this is probably, for some, a high percentage, but I think it just gives us scope. That's what I think it's there for. We don't know what the event might be. We don't know what the opportunity might present. We're not saying that we're going to spend 60% of the total budget on every event. And in fact, in many events, we're not going to spend any of it. We're just going to be the facilitators. But it's there if we need it to be. And that's why I support the recommendations from the council. Second, was Councillor Gobbett. Is anything to add?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The reality is that we're coming off the back of a time in our city's history where we need to regain a competitive foot, and in attracting large events, major events and festivals, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is, show that we are committed to drawing large events to the city and inherently the people that come with it. It's the people that support businesses, that support cafes, that shop in our local retail outlets. And this is just one way, albeit a bit passive and a bit short term, but it is a way to be competitive in bringing people back into our city. So I'm more than happy to support.
Thanks, Councillor Gobbett. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Gordon.
May I please move an amendment that point 2 be amended to replace 60% with 50%?
So we'll need a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. Councillor Gordon, if you'd like to open debate.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As previously identified to my fellow councillors, my opinion is that the 60% is inconsistent with our position as being a facilitator of events. It puts us forward as a majority funder. It puts the figure out into the public arena that we're willing to fund 60% of the cost of any of, or not of any event, but of particular events. My preference would be to rein that in to 50%. My understanding, and I'm happy for the administration to respond, is that even if we stipulate 50% in the guideline, that matters can come before council, which would enable any specific event to achieve the 60%. But I don't want to be putting an expectation out in the community of such a high figure. So my preference is the 50%. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Fleeton. Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? I might just take this opportunity to say that I don't believe, Councillor Gordon, that it creates the expectation in the community that every event that comes before us for consideration will be funded up to 60% of the total cost. I can understand why you might have that opinion. I get that, and that's reasonable. But I think what this does is it gives us the opportunity to go to those places if we need to. I wouldn't think we're going to go there for every event, but it gives us that scope. So for that reason, I would oppose the amendment. Anybody else for? Councillor Leeser.
I have a question of the CEO, really. CEO, so if there was a proposal that was just, if we accepted the 50% and it was just over 50%, let's say it's 55%, what's the process for it to come through to council?
So it would need to come through the Lord Mayor, it would need to come through to council. So often it is about the administration being able to have clear parameters and criteria as to what goes towards making these decisions. So would be the time that would be taken and possibly opportunities lost.
Can you just elaborate slightly on the time? So that component?
Sorry, through the Lord Mayor. So by the time it went through the council process, it could be as much time as it takes to get a paper prepared and ready through for council. So minimum 6 weeks.
Does anybody else wish to speak for or against the amendment? It's the amendment. Yeah. Councillor Coe?
Sorry, just a question.
Sure.
If we do end up voting to support 50% versus 60%, will that mean we'll be able to support more events?
CEO.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, yes, this would mean for next financial year, it represents an increase in that overall budget and the discretion that we're able to.
I think the question was, I think if I've understood the question right, is if we approve here 50% rather than 60%, you're saying would that therefore translate into more events supported? But I don't think that is right.
No, not necessarily. I'm sorry. I'm quite uncertain about the question.
Let me explain it
Yes,
again.
sorry. Slowly.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I think what Councillor Coe is saying is by reducing the amount of funding possible in events, i.e. only up to 50%, does that mean necessarily that there will be more events put on by the City of Perth or funded by the City of Perth? Yeah.
Thank you. Possibly.
Right. And possibly not also?
It's hard to know.
Yes.
With
That was like a doctor's prescription, Councillor Coe. I could read
so
your writing, the
sorry.
CEO could not.
So sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The
Councillor
WA Day example that we had, it was put on the agenda at a short notice. There's nothing stopping any event provider from coming to you and saying, we've got this amazing idea, can council consider it?
Correct. Through the Lord Mayor, that's really why the administration is seeking the support from council for the increase to enable us to respond to those opportunities that come up at quite short notice.
And just one follow-up question. This motion is to guide the city, is it not, in its negotiations? So what is an acceptable buffer outside of the percentage that we land on? Is it 5%? Will you entertain that and put it up to council? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? If it gets to 20%, you just say, sorry, we're not putting that motion up.
Well, see, I mean, I'll just add my own two spot. It would depend on the opportunity, would it not? I mean, how do you know what the opportunity might be? But anyway.
Correct, but I would imagine, and I'd seek advice from governance, that outside of the quantum, that anything would need to then come to council anyway. And there is a nod.
One final question, because now I'm more confused. If we had the 50% guidelines in place and we had an application for 80%, you would still send that to us?
Correct.
What's the point of moving this motion? Why don't we put it at 20%?
As was mentioned through the Lord Mayor, as was mentioned with Councillor Leeser, that it enables the city administration to have a criteria from which decisions can be made and reduces the timeframes that can go for matters coming to council.
Another follow-up question. Under your procurement policy, you can't make a call at this level, so this would still need to come to us if it's at that quantum.
CEO?
I think I'll now refer to the General Manager Community Development. I'm getting myself all confused.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor. You're correct that the guidelines provide clarity for the community and also for officers doing the assessment of what is the scope and scale of the major events and festivals that council are willing to support. That is using the council's policy for sponsorship and grants. But of course, when applications come through having done their due assessment with officers, there is discretion for council to make a decision as to what level of funding they do. So that differentiation between what officers will assess has to, I think, be very clear in terms of your policy and in terms of guidelines, and the opportunity for a council decision that may differ from that is always available to council. Thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Fleeton? Okay, well, the floor is yours if you want it. That's what we're here for. Does anybody else have anything for or against the amendment? No, so we're putting the amendment to the vote. And Councillor Gordon to close, yes. And nothing further. So this is the point 2. Yes, the motion be amended by replacing 60% with 50%. All those in favour of the amendment? That's Councillor Fleeton, Councillor Gordon and Deputy Lord Mayor Bain. All those against? It's Leeser, Coe, Gobbett, Lord Mayor and Bevan. So the amendment has been defeated 5-3. We return to the primary motion. And who'd opened us up there? So, have we moved that? Who moved it? I moved it and I've spoken. Councillor Gobbett has spoken. So it is open, yes, to debate. Anyone in for or against? No? Okay, well,
Sorry, I'm
So-
speaking for it.
Right.
On the basis that I think we need to increase our events budget, but I am perplexed as to why the council can't, if there is an opportunity, can't regularly engage with elected members about mega events or blockbuster events opportunities and demonstrate a proper return on investment for a visitor economy. For me, that's where I think we should be making our assessments for any application that comes before us, not because there is an opportunity for an event holder to come inflate their prices to get a better deal from the city, a 60% deal, and then kind of turn it around to make it look like they're actually demonstrating value for money. I think it just opens us up to an opportunity for fraud, essentially. But if this is the only way that local government can operate, I'm happy to support it.
thanks, DLM. CEO?
Through the Lord Mayor, I suppose the case in point where the council policy possibly inhibited an opportunity and the decision was taken by council was the Australia Day example, where it was significantly higher than council had previously been asked to consider. So, WA Day. And so this really, as the General Manager has suggested, provides the administration with the scope to look at the criteria, which is also established by council, or actually is established to support the policy, and then council can change the decision and so on, but it just gives a basis and somewhat more of a rigour. And if I recall the arguments that were put forward at the time when that particular recommendation was not supported, it was because the request was so significantly higher than what the guidelines provided for. So we were asking council to make a bigger decision than one where there is this sort of scope available.
Thanks, CEO.
There's a question then, just
Sure.
on that. So what is an acceptable variation? In contract it might be 20%. We have 10% variances where we put aside for contingencies. What does the city view as an acceptable amount over that they would send to us?
CEO?
I'll send it to the General Manager, but I know the answer.
Thank you. With a submission for a major festival or event, if it's gone through the assessment, if they're asking for more, we would still assess what within the scope of the 60% or 50% or whatever the decision is by council, we would assess it against that and determine what would be value for money based on the information provided that then is later acquitted. So in terms of the decision making for the assessment, it is based on the information given as to their budget and the outcomes and deliverables. We would be saying to anyone who rang us, these are the guidelines, and if whatever that percentage is in the guidelines is the guidelines. So we will then present it back to council as we do with other submissions, and the opportunity is there to accept the recommendation or to change the recommendation. So even if it's not accepted, we can provide those submissions back through to council for them to have a different view if they choose.
Thank you. But if it's 20% higher, do you say that's too much? If it's 10%, yes, we're allowed to kick this up to council. When do you get to a point where we stop the process and just let the person know?
Through to the GM, but Lord Mayor, I think if just to be clear on that, so you're suggesting if someone was to put something up that was 20% higher than the threshold, that council wouldn't even see that particular, that's the question. So would it even make its way to council if we declined it as administration?
We certainly encourage submissions to be the best chance of having success. So the guidelines we give, and we've had options and conversations where people may be right outside the ballpark of what the operational guidelines are. We would encourage dialogue to get them within the guidelines or to make a note in terms of we can get this delivered for this amount, but in an ideal perspective we may be asking for more than the guideline amount. We will work with people if it's in the range. I'm hesitant to say a percentage because then I think you're not being as clear for people in terms of saying this is the percentage that we're looking at. But there have been occasions in our history where we've looked at something and gone, the guidelines say this, the value is so significant that we're still going to note that. So that is part of our custom and practice when we look at applications, and we would continue to do that.
Councillor Fleeton? Nothing further? Anyone have anything further for or against? Can I just say, I mean, there's an element of common sense here. If an opportunity that is too good for the city to pass up, then we're going to find out about it, aren't we? Yes?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Like common
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Like, you know,
Yes.
hey, Lord Mayor and councillors, there's something really good here. You should have a look at this. You'd let us know.
Oh, through the Lord Mayor and to the Lord Mayor, as the Deputy Lord Mayor has said, absolutely, because you would probably find out about it through other means, regardless.
Okay, well, that...
Then we've got a problem.
right, so we've had for and against, we've closed, and we have no further questions, so we're going to put this to the vote. All those in favour? And we will declare that carried unanimously. Let's go, thank you everyone, let's go to 12.2, strengthening heritage assets value proposition. Would somebody like to move a motion to deal with this item? Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. A seconder, please. Thanks, Councillor Leeser. Councillor Fleeton?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So moving the officer's recommendation on page 47, I'll just make a few comments. Page 54 in the report states on the demand side, it's understood from the original notice of motion that the city doesn't need to come up with ideas. The market will tell us what people want to experience. And then it goes into, however, the recent study, Making Space for Culture 21, demonstrated a significant demand within the creative industries for space in the city and identified barriers to meeting this demand. Of 1,080 individuals surveyed, 84% are interested in having creative workspace in inner Perth, and 60% identified in the city of Perth as their preferred LGA. However, 75% of respondents identified affordability as the top reason preventing them from taking up space in inner Perth. The role of the creative industries in contributing to community vibrancy, safety and economic growth is well documented. I just want to reinforce that. That's a big part of why I moved this motion a few months ago. I'm not sure why the city used the word however, because the market told us exactly that, and that's why the stats are there. I just want to make a few points around the building eligibility as to the location. I see this in itself as a trial. If it works, there's nothing stopping a future council from expanding to new areas with new funds. I actually quite like the concentrated approach to start with, as we can really make a difference in an area that sorely needs it. I think the report nails exactly what we're trying to do. If council wants to expand the area, please consider expanding the budget, as you'll dilute the impact, rendering the project toothless in what we're trying to do in a big, bold way. Over the next few months, I'd like to see some more information on the way that the city will score applicants. I'd like to work out the percentage of funds available, as the report is ambiguous. It uses languages like, say, 5%. If you're going to use a percentage, like I was trying to get at the previous motion, what's the percentage so we can give people some surety? There's very promising research in the paper on page 55. That will come as the applications are invited in July. Despite that word, however, triggering me earlier, I very much like the report. I think it was very well put together. It was very well researched, and I'm very excited as to what we can do after July.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. Councillor Leeser was the seconder there. Anything you would like to add? Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Question?
I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay.
The point 2C of the motion be amended to read as follows: works area to be the status quo as per option A.
We need a seconder there, please. Thanks, Councillor Leeser.
She seconded the substantive.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Can do. Can do, says our man at the top.
There we go.
So carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I circulated the map to fellow elected members earlier today, I disagree with the position that the current status quo works area dilutes the impact. I believe it is essentially the same area. It just precludes people whose street frontage may be on a different street. I would prefer to see a sense of competitive tension, better applications, I see on the questions from elected members what happens, if we've got so many that we can't, so many amazing applications that we can't approve all of them, it will come to council as if it's a sponsorship or grants, and we can consider at that stage increasing the budget. So I'd like to see, my opinion is that having a greater pool of potential applicants will hopefully drive a better outcome, notwithstanding the opinion of the officers that it may dilute the impact.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Leeser, anything on the amendment?
I think the amendment is sensible because it would the option B that was suggested precludes William Street, and what Councillor Gordon is suggesting in her amendment includes William Street, and I think it's an important street to look at in terms of heritage. So that's why I'm supporting the status quo option.
Does anybody wish to speak against the amendment? Councillor Fleet.
Thanks. So looking at the map, I mean, I'm looking at it now. If you go down to St George's Terrace, there are no buildings there that would be eligible that I'm aware of. Up on William Street, you're looking at Bankwest Tower. You're heading into an area that's already been redeveloped up William Street and then down onto Wellington. So you can do this if you like. I don't think it'll actually make a material difference in the receipts or the applications that we get. My focus, particularly with this project, is Barrack Street and the malls. That's the concentration area of the upper level activation study. That's what I'm trying to match in this, but you can do this if you like.
Anyone else wish to speak for the amendment or against the amendment? Okay, so we'll now, Councillor Gordon.
Just to say to Councillor Fleeton that I agree, it's a very minor change between the two, largely based on the inclusion or exclusion of William Street and St George's Terrace. Do I know any off the top of my head that may meet the criteria? No. Does that mean that they're not there? No, it doesn't. So I just prefer to include the whole area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Now we'll put this to a vote now. This is the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? That's Councillor Leeser, Councillor Coe, Councillor Gobbett, Councillor Bevan, Councillor Gordon. Those against? Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Fleeton. So the amendment has been carried 5-3. 5-3? Okay, so we return now to the primary. And where were we? Councillor? Yes, who's right? Okay, Councillor Fleeton, have you spoken here? Yes, you have. Councillor, you have indeed, yes. Spoken a lot. Anyone else wish to speak for the motion? Anyone else against? Councillor Fleeton? No. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thanks, everybody. We move to 12.3, Commemorative Works Request, Centenary of Airmail Service, Langley Park.
I had a question, Lord Mayor, and I apologise to my colleagues. I should have asked this last week.
We just need a mover and seconder.
I'm happy to move it.
Move it, thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gordon. So question first, is it?
To the city, is this the same process that applicants would use if they want a statue?
CEO.
If I could direct this to the General Manager, Community Development.
I think it is under the same policy for commemorative, and the methodology for how that gets done could be a variety of ways, yes.
So we didn't create this new process for plaques. This had already been existing.
This is a commemorative policy under council policy.
Are there any other applications pending for any type of statues or plaques right now?
I have asked that today and the answer is no.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Fleet, would you like to open debate here? Seconder was Councillor Gordon. Nothing there. Nothing more. Anyone in favour? Wish to speak for? Or just say for? Against? Councillor Fleet, you're going to close? No. Okay. Now, do we need to wait for the Deputy Lord Mayor to return? She's gone to a bathroom break. No? Okay. Sorry to announce that. Otherwise, you might be curious. Otherwise, you might be curious as to know where the Deputy Lord Mayor has gone. All right, then, let's put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously, I think. 7-0. Anyway, and we move now to item 13. items 13, Infrastructure and Operations Alliance Reports. 13.1, variation to contract quadruple 01819/20, specialised cleaning of car parks, roads and footpaths, Part A. Would anyone like to move a motion to deal with this item? Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. A second.
Moving officer's recommendation.
Councillor Leeser. Thank you, Councillor Fleeton.
Question first. So discussion point 2 on page 83 states that quite a delegation visited this area. The CEO, the Lord Mayor, the Acting Commissioner from WA Police, along with various staff. I love this item, but what I'm hoping to understand is how much more money do we need to allocate in the next budget to do what we've just done here across the city? Because this will not be the only area.
No, that's great. CEO.
And that's actually what is proposed. And if I could invite the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations, because the administration would agree that this function and opportunity should be a regular plan for the entire city. Now to the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Lord Mayor. We've seen this cleaning trial as extremely successful, and clearly we need to extend it to other parts of the city. So we're working up a plan, but clearly we do not have the operational budgets at our disposal at this point in time. So we're going to have to defer this to the next financial year and work that into the program of works at that stage. Thank you.
A follow-up question. The numbers that I'm looking at per week or per month or whatever, surely we can buy this equipment, increase how many people we've got to use it, and just the numbers we're looking at here are astronomical. 300,000 for a weekly clean for James Street. Is that what I'm looking at?
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. CEO.
And through the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor. Through you, Lord Mayor. The $354,000 is for the existing contract, and that's to the end of its term. So that's over 2 years. So it's not per week or per month. That's the total requirement to see us to the end of the contract. But yes, you do make a good point. It is expensive. So the alternative would be to insource and to utilise our own equipment to do that. But it would require some specialist cleaning upgrades to occur. So we do not do that level of cleaning with city equipment at this stage. So it would require specialist equipment and specialist resources to undertake that type of cleaning. But it is an option to be considered.
So just a question from me through the CEO. But oh, sorry, Councillor.
No, you're the Lord Mayor. You ask a question.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Through you, CEO. So does our equipment, it can't do it, or it can't do it currently? It would need to be modified, or we would need to add to its arsenal, for example, or want of a better phrase. How would you answer that? Through you, CEO.
Look, ma'am, I'm not the expert on the cleaning equipment. I believe it's the same equipment that is currently deployed by the external contractors. It would require the training and the necessary skill sets to do the work. I don't think there'll be requirements for the modification of the equipment, but that equipment is already doing other cleaning activities. So it's probably more a question of procuring more equipment to be able to fulfill the function across the city.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Fleeton.
I'm confused, Lord Mayor. Item 12 here on page 84 states, the table below provides EnviroPath's costs in accordance with the current contracted schedule of rates to provide ongoing cleaning of James Street. Weekly, $363,000. How could that possibly be correct? To do it weekly over 2 years would cost $363,000, and we're saying that we've got the same equipment already. That doesn't make sense to me.
So let's get an understanding of those figures firstly, perhaps. Yeah.
So through the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations, Lord Mayor.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor. The cleaning is roughly $6,000 a week. Is the number that I have in my head. I haven't done the calculation, but it's roughly that $6,000 a week to undertake that work. And what we are suggesting is that we'll do it on a monthly rotation, and to the end of the contract term, that equates to $350,000.
CEO, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to suggest that's under clause 13 in the paper. I think that might assist
At the bottom of that
with the
page.
clarity.
Yeah.
13.
Councillor Lees, you're the second. Is there anything you'd like to say here?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to say that I was very encouraged to read that, let's say if there was a COVID lockdown or something like that, that the equipment could be retasked anywhere in the city. So this spend may or may not be always on James Street. So I take some comfort from that, and I'm happy to support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Leeser. Does anybody wish to speak for the motion? So I will just say that one of the things the Clean Machine has demonstrated, but also the deep cleaning that took place in James Street, is A, how necessary it was, B, the results, which were tangible and we could see, and how welcome they were from the community. I think it's also a reminder with these numbers in front of us, how expensive it is, but how necessary it is. And this is a very important function of what we do. And indeed, a lot of the feedback, a lot of it is around safety, as we know. A lot of it is around cleanliness, making our streets and our city cleaner. And I think as well as a high priority on events and activations and safety, cleanliness has to be right up there. And I think in future we should be considering whatever is necessary to make our city shine. And by that we mean clean footpaths that look noticeably clean, and that our ratepayers think if they need something cleaned, they can get it cleaned. That is very important and an important part of our function. Happy to support also. Anyone else?
So speaking for it, my questions before. So let's clarify things for me. But in the budget, we need to see a comparison about buying this buying this versus paying these variations. Because what Councillor Leeser said, I don't think is correct. If we wanted to retask it, we'd have to do a variation.
So yeah.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, yes, as part of the business case, I think we should look at the internal resourcing versus external. I would also, the clarity around the costs are actually in the paper on clause 4 as well, just to make sure that we're all clear on the weekly costs. But we can undertake that further examination of an in-sourced versus outsourced model.
Yeah, so to the General Manager's point before, you recall the figure of 6,000, it's $6,987. The 3-day cleaning cycle was completed at a cost of $6,987. Anyone else wish to speak for? Against? Councillor Fleeton. To close? Nothing further? Let's put this to the vote then. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks, everybody. 13.2, request for tender quadruple 080 electrical lighting renewal. Councillor Gordon's leaving the chamber. Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Infrastructure lighting upgrades. Can you just close that door? That'd be great. And that one in case she's got bionic ears. Would anyone like to move a motion to deal with this item?
I'm happy to move just with some questions.
Okay, well, let's get it moved first.
Yep, I'm
Thank
happy to
you.
move that.
And
Yep.
a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Coe.
So just questions first to the General Manager. So when applicants lodge a tender, do they have to sign an agreement of terms and conditions saying the price that we're submitting today is valid for a period of time, 3, 6, whatever months?
See ya.
So usually our documents require that there's a certain period, but specifically to the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Thank you, through the Lord Mayor. So generally our terms are on 90 days in terms of the validity of the tender, in terms of fixing and locking in the prices. Where there's an extension of time required, which is effectively in this instance the requirement, procurement would send out to the tenderers requesting an extension of time and therefore holding the tenders valid for the revised period. So we'd have to confirm that that actually did occur, because I am aware that the tender was first put out to the market on the 28th of August or thereabouts. And the period now to get to where we are with regard to awarding the tender is beyond the 90 days. But normally the process is that procurement would have extended the validity period to meet the timeframes such that we can lock in the prices.
And just one final question. Page 30, actually it's to do with the confidential attachment. Am I able to ask a question? No? It's important, so can I? No, I'm not going to close the meeting for it. I'll raise it with the city after. It's not going to impact on my vote.
Thanks, Councillor.
Happy to speak to them item now.
Please do.
I had serious reservations about the matrix and some of the commentary from the panel about this. The only thing that's leading me to support it is the city has a long-standing relationship with the people and the business here that have already done works. We cannot have another matrix and a scorecard and a tender assessment as bad as the one that we've got before us, not answering schedules, running out of time, not giving them more time, things not being signed, declarations not being signed. I think it's the state of the market, though, with where contractors are at and how we're trying to lock in prices now, which is the overarching consideration for me moving this.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. The second was Councillor Coe. Councillor Coe, anything you wish to add? Anybody else wish to speak for the motion? Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Fleeton, let's put this to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And if we could invite Councillor Gordon back in. (13.3) is on block, waste to energy. 14, Corporate Services Alliance reports. 14.1 on block, monthly financial report for October 2021. 14.2, schedule of accounts paid October 2021. 14.3, community group insurance program. Would anyone like to move a motion to deal with this item? Councillor Fleeton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I believe the city has my alternate motion that I'd like to put up. It's on the screen now.
So you're moving an alternate motion here? And we need a seconder for the alternate motion. Councillor Gobbett. Thank you. Councillor Fleeton.
Thank you. Just some comments which I've already provided to the city. I think the amended motion provides a buffer to future-proof the policy for premium increases and potential new eligible community groups that may come along, all while ensuring community groups must shop around for the best deal on behalf of ratepayers. The amendment is not to encourage groups to cover themselves for unnecessary amounts or cover types, more to ensure the policy doesn't need to come back to council and be amended later when it turns out we haven't covered enough to start with. From my research, the previous amounts of $2,000 would not be enough for the basic cover required. Overall, the result of this motion takes away one costly barrier for our committed volunteer groups, meaning the funds go towards the end product they're all involved for. And most importantly, it acknowledges the value that this council places on their work and what they do. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. So this is for the amendment. Councillor Gobbett. Alternate? Yeah, alternate, sorry. Alternate. Councillor Gobbett.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And just echoing Councillor Fleeton's comments, the commentary that we heard from our neighbourhood groups at the briefing session and again this evening, I think it's quite clear that that $2,000 just isn't enough quite, and that a slightly increased amount could go a long ways to assisting community groups to do the work that they do. I'm mindful that one of the comments this evening was that premiums might be increasing. So I think it's just prudent that we build in some long-term flexibility into the amount. So I think it's absolutely appropriate increasing those amounts under Part A to 50,000 and Part B to 5,000. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gobbett. Anybody else wish to speak for the alternate motion? For?
Yeah, if I speak for the motion, as a former community group member chair, I'm very aware of how challenging it is to get insurance, but I'm also aware of how challenging it is to diversify the revenue sources of community groups. And so from a city perspective, while we're very supportive of community groups, I think that we should be encouraging them not to be mendicant on the city, and to the extent that we can help them with insurance is a really good I think, balanced approach. I'm happy that it is for 12 months because I'm not completely convinced that all community groups are created alike, and I'm not sure that just handing out $5,000
for eligible community groups per annum is necessarily the right solution, but I'm very happy to give it a go. What I think would be a great alternative is to reward community groups for rewarding their communities by putting on more events. So the more events you put on, the more activation you have in your community, the more you should be rewarded. But we can cross that bridge in 12 months' time when we have the assessment of this insurance trial.
Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor. Anyone wish to speak against the alternate motion? Councillor Gordon.
Question, if I may.
Yeah.
In whatever format this item is approved tonight, what are the next steps from here? Because I appreciate that we've added in the requirement for 2 quotes, but 2 quotes for what? We've heard there's various forms of insurance available. Is it they're maintaining the status quo? Is it adding in workers' compensation, cyber security? Is it events? So when will this sort of process be in a position to be used? We had questions last week pertaining to the timing, and I think Leslie raised it again. The timing's not necessarily going to align, so can they backdate, not backdate, apply for funds already spent? So when will that be considered?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. CEO.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, some of these issues would be, I think, clarified before the beginning of the financial year. So this paper is recommending the budget be for 22-23. I also take the point about the expansiveness of the cover and what would be necessary based on the sort of activities that a neighbourhood group might undertake. Just to remind the council that the administration, when we were looking at this, included public and product liability insurance, volunteer workers insurance, associations liability insurance, and also so that were the 3 main areas. Issues around workers' compensation and the like is another sort of add-on, I suppose, and that's why the administration is recommending this is for 1 year. This gives us the opportunity to really test how all of our neighbourhoods may or may not undertake their insurance processes, and really is, I think, prudent financial management in the first year of its operations to really, for us to better understand. We also did take advice, and compared to other local governments, this is quite generous, even at $20,000 and $2,000 per neighbourhood group. So we're really wanting to take this opportunity to learn and to work with the neighbourhood groups as to what their insurance requirements are.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Gordon.
Can I, just in the interest of good governance, foreshadow the officer's recommendation in the case this is lost? Can I also just say that I actually think a hybrid of Councillor Fleeton's alternate motion and the officer's recommendation would probably hit the mark for me. I think if you apply the eligibility criteria, we actually end up with the list of community groups that Steve Willard went through tonight. They're quite not onerous, but they do require certain performance to date. So I think that in reality, it will be a budget of $4,000 per group would actually arrive at a $20,000 per annum, but I guess a 12-month trial will allow us to ascertain that, and we can go from there.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Anyone else wish to speak for the alternate motion? Against the alternate motion? Councillor Leeser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think that point 2 of the alternate motion, where Councillor Fleeton's added on the extra sentence, subject to the community group sourcing at least 2 quotes, I think that's it's going to be problematic time-wise. I think it's going to be potentially unworkable in the current form. So I'm not happy to support that extra sentence. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the alternate motion? I'm going to speak against the alternate motion on this point only, and that is that we've identified the numbers, and we've talked about $4,000 that we've heard from Steve. We heard a quote of, or a figure of 2,700. I mean, if we establish that there are 6 community groups and they were each at 4,000, that would be $24,000. So I must admit, under the banner of prudent financial management, for the first year, the trial, as I guess perhaps outlined then by the CEO, I'm reasonably comfortable with the $20,000 because I think the reality is that some of those community groups wouldn't be making an application to us, and therefore I'm not sure that we're going to need to be at 50,000 based on what we've heard from the deputations tonight. I mean, if the deputations had spoken tonight and said they were quoting figures of $6,000 each or $7,000, then I guess I'd understand that. But to me, the officer's recommendations are pretty close to the mark. And for a one-year trial, I mean, if we come back this time next year and everyone says, wow, we were way under, then fair enough. We would consider it then. But I feel comfortable with what the officers have recommended on the basis that it's a one-year trial and the numbers that we heard from the deputations tonight. So I will be opposing the alternate motion on that basis. Anyone else for the alternate motion? Anyone else against? Councillor Fleeton.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'm not too sure where I see the word trial. I thought we were moving a policy, and the policy is more than a year. So while it's only 2.7 for one group now, it could quite easily become 4.5 in future years, and we'll be doing this again, and that's fine. I just want to tackle point 2, which goes to, I think, what Councillor Bain said. We are not giving the group money and they're spending it. We're getting 2 quotes and we're reimbursing them for the expense, hence the change to the policy. 4 approves the application of a maximum funding limit. Like everything in our budget, not every dollar is expended. It's a capped amount on that line item. So the $50,000, I dare say, would not be expended. But the key part which you've missed in the contribution was B, a maximum funding limit of 5, which we've all heard that the $2,000 doesn't cover, so why not go for $5,000 to cover it when we're not going to spend the full 5? If they give us an invoice for 3.7, we'll pay 3.7. We're not going to give them an extra cash of money and say, spend that. So I urge you to stick with what's on the table now if you want to call it a trial, because it will cover everyone that's doing a lot of good work. If you go with the officer's recommendation, pretty much everyone that's active will be underfunded. So please don't do that.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, we'll need to put that to the vote then. Okay. All right, we're going to put that to the vote then, and that is the alternate motion. All those in favour? That's Councillor Coe, Councillor Gobbett, Councillor Bain, Councillor Bevan, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Fleeton. Those against, Councillor Leeser and the Lord Mayor. Carried. 5-2. 15 is Chief Executive Officer reports. On block is 15.1, Draft Strategic Community Plan 2022-2032, public consultation. 15.2, nomination of elected members to the Library Board of Western Australia. This item requires 3 elected members to be nominated for consideration by the Minister. 1 nomination has been received. That is from Councillor Angie, who is not present but contacted me today to ask to be nominated or to nominate. I'll now call for the nominations of 1, 2, 3, 4 others, however many people might be interested in being nominated. So we put 3 names. I'll just check this with the CEO. We put 3 names forward, and then who chooses? The Minister chooses. Your Minister. Oh, no, he's not your Minister. He's not. No. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, based on the nomination received, can I amend the officer's recommendation so that the council nominates Councillor Sandy Angie?
Right. Okay, so there are no other nominations, is that what we're saying?
Can I nominate Councillor Gordon?
Certainly, you can.
I second that.
I decline.
Right,
Thanks for that.
unlucky. Anyone else wish to nominate or be nominated? Yes.
Can I nominate Councillor Coe?
Well, one's on. Yeah, we put forward 3 names. They choose. But if there's not 3 names, there's not 3 names. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yes? We happy with that? Councillor Coe, you have been nominated, though. Are you accepting that nomination? Councillor Coe?
Point of order, Lord
Hang on.
Mayor. I think we need to second the amendment first.
We haven't dealt with it yet. So, Councillor Coe, are you accepting the nomination?
I'll kindly decline, unfortunately. Sorry.
Thank you.
That was also a decline.
Yeah, no, we got that. Thank you. Couldn't have been more emphatic. Right, so where are we at? Okay, so we've got a mover from Councillor Gordon, putting forward Councillor Angie. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Who are we going? Let the record show Councillor Gobbett as the seconder. Right, does anybody wish to speak for or against here? Anything you'd like to add, Councillor Gordon? Last opportunity to get yourself in contention for the library board. Okay, don't let the record show Minister Templeman any laughing at this. All those in favour? Our congratulations via text message to Councillor Angie. She'll be very pleased, I'm sure. Thank you, everybody. Carried unanimously. 15/3/2022 council meeting schedule is on block, as is under 16 committee report 16.1 the fraud and corruption plan. What a sinister title. 16.2 procurement of property portfolio consultant reports. Now, the Acting General Manager of Corporate Services, Melissa Murphy, we have received an impartiality interest here. I'll now call for a mover to close the meeting to the public to discuss the confidential attachment relating to the short. If we're going to discuss.
I'm happy to move it without discussing. Yep.
Okay, that's great. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Coe. Nothing? Councillor Coe? Nothing? All those in favour? Unanimously carried. It's done. 16, the committee reports. We've done that. Pardon me. Where are we? Sorry, 16. Right. 17. Motions of which notice has been given. Item 17. 17.1. Notice of motion. Councillor Brent Fleeton reforming the Perth parking levy. Councillor Fleeton has submitted a notice of motion regarding reforming the Perth parking levy. Councillor Fleeton, can you please move your motion? I'll get you to reserve your reasons until the motion is open for debate.
Sure. The council requests the CEO to compile a comprehensive briefing paper on reforming all aspects of the Perth parking levy, including rates, area it applies to, and what projects should be funded from the balance for consideration at an engagement session prior to the next meeting of the City of Perth Committee, to allocate $15,000 for financial modelling from an experienced consultant with working knowledge of the parking levy and the city's parking business.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Fleeton.
Thank you. So right now, every non-residential car bay in the City of Perth, with the exception of Nedlands and Crawley, pays a tax each year to the state government. This is a flat fee which ranges from $1,057 for street parking, no matter where it is in the city, $1,144 each year for undercover public parking, and $1,189 for tenant bays. To cover this, for every hour a customer parks with us and pays $4.50, $1.20 of that goes to pay this tax. Further still, the state government's forward estimates show yearly increases of 1.75%. This means every year we have to find an extra $380,000 for this tax increase if we want to keep parking fees the same. The city itself is the biggest taxpayer in this category, forking out at present $18 million a year to a fund which pays for the CAT bus and other transport projects. The problem is the fund is now sitting on an unspent balance of around $95 million. After expenses are taken out each year. This inequity started with the WA Liberals, who drastically increased the tax as a partial offset to their ballooning state debt while in government. Now, at a recent engagement session, it was clear from the state government that they are tinkering with this. They're actively looking at changing it. I was very concerned with that around what they're going to change in terms of the rates per bay, if they're going to introduce a tiered approach, so if they're going to make the tax more expensive in CBD and then tier it out, that's obviously going to have a huge impact on our tax liability. We've also got a lot of conversations going on between our transport team, their transport plan, our transport plan, two-way streets, all of these things that are up in the air. that could be solved if this fund was cracked open. I think, unfortunately, we've lost the debate that the parking levy needs to come down. So instead of keeping on about that, which I will do regardless, we need to have financial modelling showing what could be the ideal scenario for the City of Perth if it was tiered. Sydney has a similar model, and I think the modelling that we could get, I'm not too sure if we'll be able to do it before the City of Perth committee. The motion is basically saying to the city, get us the best figures you can. I don't want to spend $100,000 on this exercise. I want to spend as little as possible. But if we wait for the Auditor General to come back to us, if we wait for the state government to come to us, they would have already made up their mind. I'd really like some work done, even if it's in the city through Michael's amazing spreadsheets, which I love, even if it's through that, getting some help from consultants on the side. I think it will help us put us in a stronger position on behalf of our ratepayers to go to government and say, look, we get it. You're going to have to keep this tax going. This is what we would like to spend it on. This is what the tiered system we would like in East Perth and West Perth. It makes no sense whatsoever to have the same tax applying to a car bay in East Perth, Northbridge, and sitting in the middle of town. So some modelling on that would be appreciated.
Thanks, Councillor Fleeton. Councillor Gordon. Okay. Does anybody wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Coe.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Has the Auditor General given us an indication when something's coming back to us?
So we wrote to the Auditor General, I think it was around midway through the year or perhaps a little earlier than that. The letter received said that that the Auditor General was going to undertake the body of work that we had requested and that we were likely to hear back towards the end of this year or in the first quarter of next year. Now, clearly it's not, we have not heard back, so it's not going to be the end of this year, clearly. So we would expect to hear back based on that information in the letter in the first quarter of next year. But there was no certainty around that. And I do remember the letter clearly said that, you know, depending on what else comes up, this can be pushed back in our schedule of work. So there's no certainty when we will hear back from the Auditor General, although the indication is the first quarter of next year. I got that right, CEO?
Correct, Lord Mayor.
So anyone for or against, or was there another question? Councillor Bevan?
I have a question, please, maybe to the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development. Item 6, decision implications. It states there that we're exposed to risks. Could that be elaborated on, please?
Through you, CEO.
And through to the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development.
Thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor, I guess what that point is trying to make is if we're going to try and build a very strong case that we want to put publicly, we need to make sure that we get the numbers right. So the purpose of that point was to say if there is an expectation that it is going to be a very comprehensive body of work, then we need to do it properly and it may not be done in the shorter time frame. But if there is an appetite from Council to do some more rudimentary modelling, just to give Council an idea about what the implications of different scenarios would mean for the city, then we can do that, but it won't be the comprehensive piece of work that we could ultimately do later on.
Thank you, General Manager. That's well explained. Thanks, Councillor Bevan, for your question. Anybody wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion, Councillor Leeser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you to Councillor Fleeton for this motion. There are many inequalities in the way that the Perth parking levy is administered by the Department of Transport. And one small example is the Department of Transport do not invoice the owner of the parking space. The way invoices are addressed is especially problematic in a strata scheme, as the strata company receives the invoice from the Department of Transport, addressed to the strata company, not to the individual commercial strata lot owner. The strata company as a whole is invoiced and pays, not the lot owner. The effect of this is the lot owners who do not own and certainly can't use a privately owned commercial car space end up paying for it anyway. This is very problematic in mixed-use strata schemes, whereas it is especially unfair for residential owners to be burdened with the Perth parking levy costs for commercial parking bays they do not own and cannot use. There does appear to be work on this currently, and I'm glad the Lord Mayor and the City of Perth have sought an audit. And it's pleasing to see in the briefing paper that the City has already commenced the process of seeking legal advice to understand the process and consultation the state government is required to undertake prior to making any legislative change. Although I commend the spirit of Councillor Fleeton's motion, my opinion is it's premature to spend any more ratepayers' money at this point, and especially up to 100,000, as is written in the briefing paper, before the outcomes of the legal advice and the Auditor General's report are received. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lisa. CEO, can I ask a question? So I see there's an amount of $15,000 mentioned here for the financial modelling from an experienced consultant with working knowledge of the Perth parking levy and city's parking businesses. So can you just give some clarity on that $15,000 figure?
Yes, Lord Mayor, and I think the discussion just with the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development, and with Councillor Fleeton, it's suggesting that this is really a high-level assessment and one which would be informative. So it's not a full-blown review, rather something that will inform our conversations with the City of Perth Committee and also with the Auditor General. But there may be, after this early piece of work, an opportunity, if council supports, to do a larger body of work.
But that would come back to council, correct?
Correct.
For consideration. So this gives us the opportunity to have some data, to have some facts and figures when we're thrashing it out with whoever we might be thrashing it out with. Okay, is there anybody that wishes to speak for? Anyone else against? Sure, DLM.
This Perth parking levy is, next to homelessness and antisocial behaviour, one of the biggest issues that is a conversation piece for commercial businesses in the city. And for many years, they've been screaming out for action. They've been screaming out for this council to try and do something to put pressure on the state government to reconsider its position. If there's one thing history has told us, is that governments don't like to take away levies. Once a tax is in, it's in. Anything that we can do to put pressure and to illustrate to our ratepayers that we are trying to understand and reconfigure the impact of this parking levy is critical. And so that's why I'm very supportive of this motion. We don't have the time to sit back and kind of wait for some activity from the Auditor General, who I'm very respectful of. We don't have to wait. Very respectful of the Auditor General. But we don't have time to wait for their schedule to become available. So that's why I'm very supportive of this motion and any other motions that try to deal with the Perth parking levy.
Thanks, TLM. Appreciate that. Does anybody else wish to speak against? I too will speak for it. Look, I think many of us have advocated, certainly in the mayoral campaign back in the day, seems a distant memory now, but I remember standing up at the Property Council and saying that the Perth parking levy needs to either be suspended, reduced, or the money needs to be spent. And none of those things have happened. And we've all been making those noises for our ratepayers and for our property owners in the 14 months since our election. And that battle continues. And this really just enables us, Councillor Fleeton's motion, I think here, enables us to continue our advocacy in this area. And the Deputy Lord Mayor is correct. Many of those of you around the table who have expressed this view, either in here or outside, are also correct. This is a significant issue and it's an impediment to people doing business or opening businesses or doing property work in the city. They don't like paying it. It seems unfair and it is a very high cost, particularly in the outer inner ring, if you like, West Perth, East Perth, etc., down to Nedlands, Crawley. So I too am happy to support. Anyone against? Wish to say anything? Councillor Coe.
Just a brief question. Is 15,000 enough? Will it be enough?
CEO.
Could I ask the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development, to answer that, Lord Mayor?
Sure.
Thank you, and through you, Lord Mayor, I guess the $15,000 is an estimate that Councillor Fleeton has put forward as a basis for the notice of motion. We won't know what it would cost until we actually get some quotes for the work. We will need to see quotes for this work from consultants. So it may not be 15, it may be slightly more. It does depend on the scope. I think if we're going to go all out, it'll be a bigger scope, but if we're looking at a much quicker turnaround just to give us that indicative modelling, it'll be a much tighter scope. So it won't be the 100,000, it'll certainly be down the lower scale, but whether it's 15 or 30 or 35, we'll only figure that out once we get the quotes from the consultants.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from anyone? Councillor Fleeton? Councillor Gordon?
Can I move an amendment?
Yeah.
To delete item 2 of the motion.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gobbin? Thank you. Councillor Gordon?
So I think the mover of the notice of motion has made it clear that perhaps while the notice of motion states a comprehensive briefing paper, it's really a best endeavours in the time given to position ourselves to have the conversations we need to have in this space in the time that we need to have them. So proposing delete item 2 to leave that open for future identification by way of quotations.
Okay. Councillor Gobbin?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to ask a question, without writing a blank cheque to the admin, is there an account or some sort of operating account that this money could come out of, or does it need to come back to council to formally approve any expenditure?
CEO?
Through the Lord Mayor, I wouldn't possibly attempt to answer that question. If I could ask Michael Kent to answer.
Mr. Spreadsheet, here's your chance.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I think it is obviously important to have some sort of an indicative budget. The way that the financial management regulations work, I would strongly encourage council to consider providing a budget as part of this recommendation, because otherwise what you're asking to do is not an existing budget line, it's an additional purpose under the Act, which would require us to come back to council for approval for the budget anyway.
Okay. CEO?
And if I could add, the procurement process for a process above the threshold of, I think, 50,000 would take more time than is available anyway. So indicatively, it wouldn't be unreasonable to say sort of between 20 and 40. Would that be? If I'm looking at both Michael Kent.
Ask a question?
Sure.
So the motion as it stands that's on the table is requesting that the CEO compiles the briefing paper. You've got a procurement policy at your disposal to approve any procurement with 3 quotes up to 75,000.
Perfect. So that's
what you've got.
Which is why the suggestion by Councillor Gordon to delete the reference 2.2 would give us sufficient scope.
If required. Yep. Okay. So, is there anybody else that wishes to speak for the amendment? The seconder you've spoken?
I asked a question, another question if I could. So just for absolute clarity, the removal of the 15,000, I don't know the right way to put it, but it's pre-approving, for want of a better word, an amount of 75,000 up to 75,000 potentially. Is that the way that I understood Councillor Fleeton?
Could I possibly see how it would happen? So with the time frame that we've set, what would happen right now is the general manager's team would go away, do absolutely everything that they could without going external. At the EMES before the City of Perth committee meets, the GM will give us a briefing paper and say, this is where we've got to. Here are 3 potential ways that we could scope a consultant to help us. Here's how much it would be, and here's the time frame. Or not do that, we've got the information that we need to go to government and say, how about we introduce a tiered system and start spending the money? It could be as simple as that.
Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. And same question that I asked to the administration. Could I just get that advice from the admin? Are we limiting our ability to do this work, or are you comfortable that you can access $75,000 up to if you need to?
CEO?
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor. So we have the procurement authorisation. I think what I'm hearing from council is that we're looking at some preliminary work around the tier approach to the parking levy. We already have some data which we in-house can model. So it really is then, once we've collated all that information, determining if it would be better served that we go externally and have that overlay, or whether the information that we can bring to council is sufficient. So we'll only know that once we've started the body of work.
Again, the question wasn't really answered. Are you comfortable that you could spend 75,000 if that's what it took, if that's what you needed?
I wouldn't be wanting to spend 75,000 given the baseline that's been provided in the notice of motion is 15. So I would feel it's very difficult to predict, but I think anything above, let's say 40,000, you're looking at a much bigger project, and the timeframes and the scope are tight and short. And so I would think anything more than 30, we probably would be entering into a completely different sort of project. So I would expect it would be below 30,000.
So if that's, sorry to labour the point, but can you confidently spend 30,000 then?
I'm just not sure.
Need to.
What's the question though?
So is it, I'm just mindful that if we're taking out that amount, and Mr. Kent has said he'd prefer to see an amount in there, and Councillor Fleeton's saying, but our procurement policy allows this, I just want to make sure that we're covering our bases and not going to trip ourselves up if in the event that the CEO does need to expend potentially 30,000.
Well, I think we've heard that is quite possible here and can happen, correct?
Correct. However, for the time frames, so I think up to 30 would be your it's really difficult to predict exactly what the cost would be, other than to say what our Chief Finance Officer is wanting certainty from his budget perspective. And what I'm suggesting is we have delegations through our procurement arrangements that we can go up to 75. I think if we move past a 30,000 threshold, we are entering into a larger project, because with the time frame for a consultant to spend 30,000 in that time would be quite, might not be the best investment for us.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael, how are you saying that? Yes, CEO?
Sorry, if I could invite the CFO maybe to add to my commentary.
Thank you very much, through the chair. I mean, everything that the CEO has just explained in relation to the procurement process is entirely correct, 100% correct. The challenge that we have, and perhaps I should have been more explicit earlier, is irrespective of the procurement thresholds, we still need a budget line item. So by removing the second point in that recommendation, we don't actually have a budget line to expend against, notwithstanding that everything the CEO has said about our procurement thresholds is entirely correct.
Yep, Deputy Lord Mayor.
But as is the case with other things, you have put estimates in budget line items. Is that correct, CEO?
Yeah, through to CFO.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, the situation is with the budget, because you're actually looking to expend on something that is not currently an existing identified line item of any sort, you actually don't have anywhere to spend against. So all you would need to do to fix this is actually, sorry if I may offer a suggestion, is to actually reinstate point 2 with a dollar value perhaps a little larger than the 15,000, potentially up to 30,000, which would then allow all the things you're trying to achieve to happen in an expedient manner. And in the event that it turned out that the bigger piece of work was required, then we could come back and amend that budget line item.
Okay, thank you, Michael. CEO, do you want to say anything there?
Good advice.
Right, okay. So what are we planning now?
Ask a question, please, just
Thank
to
you.
keep this going. 2 right now doesn't tell us where the money's coming from. Now, we do have a line item in the budget It's called the fund that keeps the liability for the Perth parking levy, which has a reserve and a buffer that grows over time. Taking 15,000 or 30,000 from that is not going to be a dent to the ocean. But again, I reiterate, there is no plan to go out to a consultant yet. We need to get the briefing paper from Dale Page's team before the EMAS, before the City of Perth Committee, and then we work out the scope. Then we can talk about going out to a consultant. This has been blown out of all proportion.
Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. So we are still debating the amendment. Councillor Gordon will get the opportunity to close the debate in a moment. Is there anybody else speaking for or against? Councillor Gordon?
Just to reiterate that by removing point 2 of the motion, that you're removing both the budget allocation and, as Councillor Fleeton's pointed out, the request to engage an experienced consultant. So it's really basically a councillor asking for an engagement session on a highly relevant item, which I think we should all support.
Yes. Yeah, I think we all support it. I'm just, yeah. Yeah. So this is on the amendment. We're voting on the amendment, and that is to take 2 out, correct? Okay. All those in favour? Coe, Gobbett, Lord Mayor, Bain, Bevan, Gordon and Fleeton, and those against, Councillor Leeser. That has been carried. As amended. 7-1. Back to the primary motion now.
Do you want me to close?
Yes, please.
All right. The audit only looks back at how money has been spent. It's not looking forward. The city's advice to find out the legal argument or the legal requirement is simply, does the state have to consult with us? It's got nothing to do with modelling. The motion is all about getting our best interests in order. And as Councillor Gordon put it, yes, it is me asking for an engagement session on a highly topical issue. But as we have just watched, and so has your cousin in Greece, it is extremely...
It's my sister.
Sorry, your sister in Greece. It is extremely frustrating getting some things through this organisation, which should only come through this body in this room. The other frustrating thing, which I could not believe, was the 2 transport officers, one from the City of Perth and one from the state government, disagreeing on priorities for the City of Perth in the same room. So with what Dale Page is doing, please find out a comprehensive list of projects that we can fund from this balance. The state can take the credit for it if they want. I'm sick of having this ridiculous debate between our own transport officers on what's the best thing for the city.
Thank you, Councillor Fleeton. Let's put this to the vote now. All those in favour? And that is Councillor Coe. Is that you, Councillor Leeser? Councillor Coe, Councillor Gobbett, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Bevan, Councillor Gordon and Councillor Fleeton. That has been... those against? Councillor Leeser. That's carried 7-1. Item 18, matters for which the meeting may be closed. That's not needed. 19, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business for tonight's agenda. So with that, I'll take this opportunity to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. Again, thank the team for their incredibly hard and diligent work over 2021. It's been a great pleasure to preside over this chamber and to work with this team. And by this team, I mean not only the elected members, but also all of the administration. A lot of great things have been achieved, and we really look forward to getting on and achieving a whole lot more in 2022 and beyond for the City of Perth. Thank you, everybody. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. With no further business, I'll declare the Ordinary Council meeting closed at 7:01 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Would you all please rise for the Honourable Lord Mayor, Mr. Basil Zempilas.